Some graves are meant to stay closed, but when curiosity or hunger gets the best of you, the dead have a way of making sure you never leave. I'm Blair Bathory, and welcome to the Something Scary podcast. Thank you for joining us as we descend into the darkness together. First, graveyard secrets demand revenge, followed by crows, corpses, and chaos. Finally, in our last story, predator hides in plain sight. And you can send us your own spooky encounters or untold true crime stories at SomethingScary@Snarled.com.
So, wanna hear something scary?
Restless bones. Some deaths are too big to ignore, especially when the dead come calling. Like in this story, passed down to Allah Ja from her grandmother. Johnny lived in a small apartment with his mom and dad. Money was tight, and the fridge was almost empty. One gray afternoon, his stomach growled. His mom handed him a few bills, her eyes tired and worried. "Go to the grocery store, Johnny," she said. "Get some ribs. We need to eat tonight." The apartment smelled faintly of vinegar and herbs. The faint hum of the old refrigerator, the only sound besides the distant wail of sirens from the street below. Johnny grabbed the cash and stepped outside. The wind rattled the trash cans and made the flickering streetlights feel like they were watching him. He passed graffiti-stained walls and cracked sidewalks, wishing the night were brighter, safer. At the corner store, the butcher shook his head. "No ribs today, kid. Only pork skins." Johnny's stomach twisted. He handed over some of the money for the skins, wishing it could stretch far enough to fill his family's empty plates. As he turned to leave, a man stepped out from the shadowed alley behind the store. He was tall and thin, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, hiding most of his face. In his hands, he held a long iron shovel that gleamed even in the dim light. "You need help feeding your family?" the man asked, his voice scraping like dry leaves across pavement. Johnny frowned. "How would a shovel help feed my family?" The man leaned closer, eyes glinting in the flickering light. "This isn't just a shovel. Take it to a grave that's fresh, someone who's died recently, and you'll understand. I know your family is hungry." Johnny shivered. He wanted to run, drop the shovel, forget everything. But his stomach wouldn't let him. Slowly, reluctantly, he paid the man and took it. The cemetery was only a few blocks away, but the fog that had rolled in made it feel like a world apart. Gravestones rose like jagged teeth through the mist. Damp earth smelled faintly of decay, and the cold air made Johnny's fingers ache. Every few steps, his shoes squished in the mud, and the distant hoot of an owl made him jump. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming shapes that his imagination insisted were moving toward him. Johnny approached a fresh grave, the soil still loose and moist. He thought of his mom's tired smile, his dad's worn shoes, and the empty plates waiting at home. He dug, each shovel full of dirt heavier than the last, until his shovel struck something solid. His stomach churned and sweat ran down his temples. Carefully, he unearthed the body of an old man who had died just days before. Cold and gray, the corpse's clothes were surprisingly intact. Johnny wrapped it in a sheet he had brought, avoiding its face, and hurried home. Back in the apartment, faint hum of the fridge and the distant city sounds were suddenly oppressive. His mom had prepared the salad and was beginning to cook what she assumed were the pork ribs. She hummed softly, unaware of the horror Johnny carried. The first bite his parents took drew delighted murmurs. "Tender. Perfect," his mom said. "The best ribs we've ever had." Johnny sat frozen, unable to speak. The meat they chewed was the flesh of a man, someone who had only recently been put to rest in the ground. He forced himself to eat only the salad, swallowing slowly, willing his stomach not to betray him. That night, Johnny lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, trying to sleep off the terror. The apartment was too quiet, each hum of the refrigerator and distant siren magnified in the darkness. Then he heard it, a faint whisper, almost too soft to hear.
Johnny. Johnny.
Heart hammering, Johnny hid under his blankets. Minutes crawled by, stretching like hours. Then came a knock at the front door. Knock, knock, knock.
Johnny, I'm on your doorstep,
said the voice low and cold. Johnny pulled the blankets tighter over his head. The seconds felt infinite. Then a whisper from the staircase.
Johnny, I'm on your stairs.
He trembled. The apartment felt impossibly large. Each creak of the floorboards magnified, shadows twisted in corners. A cold breeze brushed the back of his neck, though all the windows were shut. Finally, the voice came from the parents' room.
Johnny, I'm in your parents' room.
Cold sweat ran down his back. He knew, deep down, that something was coming for him, something he could not hide from. The silence snapped. A thundering tunk echoed through the apartment, followed by a blood-curdling scream.
Johnny, I'm in your room.
The corpse had returned. Its eyes glowed with a terrible, unnatural light. Its mouth twisted into a grim, terrible smile as it reached for Johnny. He tried to scream, but no sound came. The cold fingers tore at him, ripping him from his bed. His last thoughts were of his mother's salad, the warmth of the apartment, and the terrible choice that had brought him here. By morning, the apartment was silent again. No sign of Johnny remained, and his parents awoke to find the apartment as it had been, except for the faint, lingering stench of earth. From that day on, the story was told again and again, a warning whispered through generations. Never disturb the dead. Never disrespect a grave. Some debts are too heavy for the living to bear, and some voices never let you sleep again. That was the Johnny story, a chilling reminder that some boundaries should never be crossed. Even in desperation, disturbing the dead can have consequences far beyond what we imagine. If you were in Johnny's shoes, would you have made the same choice, or would you have walked away? Hey everyone, so I wanted to check in and ask you if you've seen the new Ed Gein, the very famous serial killer series on Netflix. What do you think? And I also wanted to pose the question, do you think it's right that we're making series about serial killers, or is it just art? Also, I would love to see what you're planning on being for Halloween. So if you want to tag us on Instagram or YouTube, share the characters that you're planning on being this Halloween. Some jobs aren't just lonely, they're deadly. And in the middle of nowhere, the crows aren't the only thing you should fear. Like in this account told by Colin Austed. The ad caught Jake's attention. The moment he saw it posted on the old bulletin board outside the local library. Needed, full-time scarecrow. This has to be a joke, right? Jake asked as he looked at the simple ad. The rest of the page contained only a phone number and no other information. With his funds dwindling, Jake was desperate for a job of any kind, and with a shrug, he called the number. It rang 3 times before a rough male voice answered with a,
"Yeah?"
"Hi, I'm calling about the full-time scarecrow," Jake said, trying to keep the laughter out of his voice.
"Yeah."
The man said again.
"What about it?"
"Is the job still available, or is it," Jake asked, on the verge of hanging up the phone.
"It's still available, and you don't need any experience. You just need to know how to handle a shotgun."
The man said gruffly. "A shotgun, sir?" Jake asked, confused.
"You got wax in your ears, son?"
The man spat.
"Yes, you need to know how to shoot to keep the crows away. Do you want the job or not?"
Jake paused and then asked, "Am I shooting the crows to kill them, or am I protecting your crops?" There was the sound of static as the man sighed heavily.
"People who ask too many questions are either stupid or they just want to waste my time. So which one are you?"
Jake considered hanging up, but his growling stomach and empty wallet reminded him of his missed meals and lack of a decent bed. That pushed him forward. "Neither, sir," And yes, I am familiar with the shotgun. My dad taught me when I was... Jake began, but the man cut him off.
Say me your life story and report to my farm tonight.
The man snapped. He gave Jake an address that was in the middle of nowhere. After the man hung up without another word, Jake hoped he was making the right decision as he headed towards the bus station. The sun was just beginning to set as Jake got off the bus in the small town where his latest job was to take place. As he walked, he pulled his tattered jacket tighter around him, heading towards the farm on the edge of town. The farm consisted of a small farmhouse, a barn, and one giant cornfield. In the center of the cornfield was what looked like a watchtower, just taller than the corn itself. Fearful of being shot at for being mistaken for a trespasser, Jake made his way up the gravel driveway and the sagging front steps of the farmhouse. He knocked 3 times before he saw the scrap piece of paper taped to the front door. In rough handwriting, it said, "To the new scarecrow, go to the watchtower in the middle of the field. You'll find your shotgun there along with a few boxes of ammo. There's a CB radio in which you can use to talk to me and only me. Your job is simple. Fire your shotgun into the air to scare off the crows. Do not leave the watchtower and go into the cornfield for any reason because you will get lost. And I'm not coming out to find you. I'll bring you food 3 times a day along with your pay." There was no signature at the bottom of the note. Shrugging, Jake made his way around to the back of the farm, where he found a shovel planted in the dirt at the edge of the cornfield. Tied to the shaft of the shovel was the length of string that led off into the cornfield. "I guess this is how I find my way in," Jake muttered as he followed the string. Instantly, he felt the tall stalks close in around him as he made his way towards the watchtower. By the time he reached the base, he was sweating, and his legs felt like jelly as he climbed the ladder and entered the small room at the top. There, he found a small cot with a ratty blanket and pillow, a folding chair that had seen better days, and a bucket he assumed was his toilet. Leaning against the far wall was a shotgun and 2 boxes of ammo. A small table held an old CB radio that hummed slightly. Before he could do anything, the radio mic squawked to life, and the same rough voice of his employer barked out,
You up there yet?
Jake took the mic and pressed the button on the side. "Yes, sir, I'm here," he said.
Just remember what I told you about not going into the cornfield. Do that, and you'll be fine.
His employer growled. As Jake pressed the button to reply, there was a low crack against the side of the tower. Startled, Jake looked around to see one of the glass windows had cracked and was now smeared with a collection of blood and dark feathers.
What was that?
His employer growled.
Did you break something already?
Jake didn't answer as he stepped out onto the small balcony that ran all around the tower and looked down. There, he saw the body of a large crow lying crumpled and broken at his feet.
Hello, new guy, are you there?
His employer asked from the radio. Jake stepped back inside the tower and pressed the mic button. "Yes, sir, I'm here. But a crow just flew into the window and killed itself," he said in a shaken voice. There was a snort and sounded like static as his employer said,
Stupid birds. That's all they do. Break stuff, steal my corn, and dig up the ground.
"I'm sorry, but did you say they dig up the ground?" Jake asked, confused.
Don't worry about that.
His employer said roughly.
You just worry about keeping those black buzzers away until it's time for me to harvest. Hopefully, I won't break my leg when I step in one of their holes again.
Before Jake could open his mouth, the radio cut off. Sighing, he took up the shotgun, loaded it, and stepped out onto the balcony to begin his first ever job as a scarecrow. The evening seemed to stretch on, and before long the sun was rising. Jake felt a hard thump against the base of the tower. Looking down, he saw the broad backside of a man in overalls and boots retreating into the cornfield toward the farmhouse. "I guess it's time for breakfast," Jake said as he climbed down the ladder and found a paper plate with a single strip of bacon, a pile of grits, and a biscuit. Next to it was a paper cup of milk. "The breakfast of all scarecrows," he said with a laugh, eating his meager meal in one bite and a gulp. Once he had climbed back up the ladder, he got a few hours of sleep before the radio crackled to life and the deep voice of his employer woke him.
Some kids lost their remote-control airplane in my cornfield. If you can find it, tell those brats to fly somewhere else.
But you said to never, Jake began, but his words were cut off with a snort and the radio went silent. Now what? Jake asked aloud as he scanned the cornfield for any sign of the crashed plane. He saw a dent in the corn just ahead, then an idea struck him. He took his blanket and pulled a long length of thread from it, hoping this tether would be long and Jake could climb down the ladder and tie one end of the string to the base of the tower and the other end to his belt loop. Hoping the makeshift tether wouldn't snap, Jake set off into the cornfield, and a few minutes later, he felt a familiar, overwhelming sense of being surrounded. As he tried to keep his bearings, his foot caught on something, and he fell face first into the dirt. What the? Jake grunted as he looked back to see what he had tripped over. But it wasn't a model airplane. It was a hole in the ground. Closer inspection revealed claw marks as if some small creature had been digging. I wonder if this is one of the holes the boss was talking about, Jake muttered. With a grunt, he got to his feet and pressed forward. Soon, the sun began to dip below the cornstalks, and the shadows took on a sinister look. As his imagination grew, Jake heard the cawing of the crows above him and hoped to find the airplane soon. No sooner had he thought that, he spotted a bright red and white model airplane wedged between several cornstalks. Sighing with relief, Jake reached for it, but as soon as he touched it, the motor whirred to life. Jake jumped back in surprise, making sure to keep his hand away from the spinning prop. He took the airplane down and with a great heave, tossed it into the air. He watched it fly in a graceful arc, and in the distance, he could hear the excited cheers of children. With the sun now fully set, Jake made his way back to the watchtower as the cawing grew louder. Soon, it felt as if hundreds of crows were circling him. His heart thumped as he ran. Each step revealed more holes in the earth, and he struggled to keep his balance. Then, the sound of flapping wings reached his ears, and he turned to see several large crows swooping down like dark, winged shadows. What the? Jake cried as the first crow's sharp beak snapped at his head. He ran, arms over his head, and slammed into the ladder of the watchtower. Climbing, he pulled himself up and barricaded the door with his mattress and the small table. Jake grabbed the shotgun in one hand and the CB microphone in the other, pressing the button. "Boss, I need your help!" he yelled. But there was no answer, only static and the cawing of crows outside. Snarling, Jake threw down the microphone and racked the sight on the shotgun and aimed at the windows, preparing to go down fighting. But then something strange happened. The crows retreated to the cornfield, and one by one, all of them dove headfirst into the cornstalks and vanished from sight. With his heart still lodged in his throat, Jake carefully pushed open the door to the watchtower and looked outside. All that he could hear was the sound of the wind in the cornstalks that whispered among themselves. Then he heard it. It was the shuffling sound of footsteps coming towards the tower. At first, Jack looked towards the farmhouse, hoping that it was his boss, who had come to see what the noise was all about. But the lights of the farmhouse were dark, and there were no sign of life in the upstairs bedroom windows. The footsteps were coming closer, and Jake saw the cornstalks parting as several dark figures made their way through the dark cornfield. With a jolt of fear, Jake saw what was making the noise as the first figure stepped into the moonlight. It was a human corpse, and on its shoulder was a crow. Gripping the shotgun in both hands, Jake put the buttstock on his shoulder and fired. He barely felt the recoil as the first corpse was blasted apart and the crow on his shoulder flew off into the night sky. Then Jake racked the slide and took aim as the next hunched-over corpse came forward and began to climb the ladder. Soon the air was filled with the sound of gunfire and flying crows as Jake dispatched every corpse that came near the watchtower. Soon there was a faint click as the last round was spent. Trembling, Jake moved to the farthest corner of the watchtower and there was a sharp crunch under his foot. Looking down, he saw the now broken microphone and jumped as it cracked to life. From it, the voice of his boss suddenly spoke.
Hey kid, did I mention that? The field was built over an old graveyard, and the crows never liked it unless I give them my scarecrow.
There was a sharp hiss of static that seemed to drown out Jake's screams as the crows and the dead tore into him. stop thinking about Jake, stuck up in that watchtower while the crows circled and the dead came for him. It makes me wonder how I'd react if I were in his shoes. Would I have the courage to face what's out there, or would fear take over? What about you? How would you think you would go when survival and terror collide? Sometimes the dead and the cursed walk among us, and even the kindest faces may hide a predator. Like in this account of an Ethiopian urban legend so terrifying, the reporter asked to remain anonymous. Shadows pulled in every corner of the little Ethiopian village. The moon, a pale coin behind drifting clouds. Somewhere on the hills, a hyena's cackling split the silence, a sound that made your skin crawl, made even grown men clutch their crosses. Grandmother Taitu leaned close to her wide-eyed granddaughter, Hana. The candle flickered, carving strange shapes across the mud walls of their hut. Her voice was low, almost a growl. You want a story that chills the blood, Hana? Then listen. This is no bedtime tale. It's a warning. Evil, it doesn't always come with horns or claws. Sometimes it smiles at you. Sometimes it waits until you stop praying. Hana twisted her small hands in her lap, eyes wide. Taitu gaze glimmered with memory. When I was your age, the village, it buzzed with whispers. Some said an old widow by the river was a witch. Her goats too fat, her harvest too rich for a woman alone. Then there was the traveling merchant, always coming with the moon, mumbling prayers no one understood. But me, I never trusted Gebra, the blacksmith. Her jaw tightened, kind to others, yes, fixed pots, sharpened knives, even gave children sweets. But my father, he once asked Gebra for help when our plow broke, planting season. We had no money then. Gebra laughed in front of half the village, said God does not give bread to beggars. I never forgot that. The candle hissed, almost agreeing. Still, he was always around, always watching. Never went to church, said he was busy at the forge. But even as a child, I knew that was an excuse. Blacksmiths, they carry old secrets. Older than kings, older than the church. And well, old secrets, they never stay clean, child. Never. Her voice sank to a whisper. One night, after a long vigil, I walked home alone. The path, it wound past the graveyard, and that night, the stones seemed to lean closer, shadows pulling like dark water. Hyenas prowled among the broken graves, noses flicking at the earth, ears twitching to every whisper of the wind. Everyone feared that place. Hyenas dig, you know. They steal bones. They carry the dead in their jaws. Some say the spirits themselves wander there, hungry for the living. I clutched my silver cross tight and whispered the Lord's Prayer over and over. But children, foolish children, my mind wandered. I thought of Gebra, of how he'd sharpened my sandal strap that morning, smiled when he handed it back. And in that moment, I let my prayer slip. Her voice cracked. The night, it changed. Cold, though no wind blew. I heard it then, a growl, low, hungry, closer than it should have been. And then the padding of paws, slow, like it knew exactly where I was. I turned and my heart, oh, it froze. A hyena bigger than I'd ever seen, fur bristling, teeth long and yellowed, eyes burning red, or maybe just the moonlight catching them. And still, I felt its mind cunning, watching me, as if it could speak without moving its jaw. Even now, I sometimes wonder, but I knew this was no ordinary beast. Her hands trembled. It lunged. I fell hard onto the dirt. Hot breath smothered me. Claws tore my arm. I screamed, throat bleeding. No one came. The weight pressed me into the earth. My cross slipped, but still, I forced the words out. Jesus' prayer. Broken, desperate. The hyena, it snarled, shook me like a doll. But the words would not stop. For a moment, just a moment, it faltered. I reached up, clawed at its face. My fingers struck its eye. I felt it give beneath my nails. Hannah gasped, covering her mouth. The beast shrieked, stumbled back, blood streaming. It circled, but the prayer still burned on my lips. Again and again and again. The hyena yelped and vanished into the shadows, but not entirely. I could feel it watching, waiting. I crawled home shaking, dress torn, arm bleeding. Mother wept, cleaned my wounds, kissed my face, said I was safe. But I knew I would never truly be safe again. Silence pulled between them. Hannah whispered, "What happened to the hyena?" Taitu's gaze turned grim. The next morning, some said Gabra, he was gone. Forge cold, tools scattered. Others, they claimed they saw him leaving at dawn. A rag tied across his face. But I heard other things too. Days later, walking toward Gojam, eyes both there. Maybe he left because of debts? Not curses. Truth twists like smoke, child. Hard to catch, but still. When the wind carries the faintest howl across the hills, I know. The Boda, it wears many faces. That night, its breath, it was his. She leaned close. Hannah could feel her breath. Remember, child, evil can wear a friendly face. The Boda waits. It feeds when face slips. Never let your guard fall. Not for a heartbeat. The candle guttered, throwing their shadows wild against the wall. And outside, not the laughter of a pack, but the lonely, furious howl of something, perhaps moving and missing eye. Hannah shivered. She wondered if her grandmother spoke the truth, or if it was just an old woman's bitterness, shaped into the form of a monster. And so Hannah is left with the lingering question, was it really a hyena or something far older and darker wearing a familiar face? Stories like these remind us that evil often hides in plain sight, waiting for a single moment of weakness. What about you? Would you recognize it if it walked right past you? And you can send us your own spooky encounters or untold true crime stories at SomethingScary@Snarled.com. Has anyone ever had a terrifying encounter involving your animals or something supernatural? Tell us your story by sending us an email at SomethingScary@Snarled.com. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at Snarled so you never miss an episode creeping your way. And trust me, you won't want to miss a thing, particularly as we gear up for spooky season. Until then, sweet screams.
This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, audio edited and mixed by Calvin Linderman, produced by Fitz Harris, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sandalo and Calvin Linderman.